If you view your life as a piece of fabric or a tapestry, the photography is the stitching. It keeps everything together. It gives me, impetus to express myself, to communicate. I was not destined to be a photographer. I was in school to be a writer until I was required to take this photography class, and I borrowed my father's old camera. I just started making pictures with it, and I think I thought two things. I think this whole endeavor felt really natural and a good expression for my imagination. And secondarily, I thought to myself, this could keep me out of an office. I work really, really hard when I'm in the field. I figure things out. I'm not some technical virtuoso who's kind of out there like, okay, well, give me God's light over here. And it ain't like that. There are pictures in my career that I have shot that one frame required 5 days. I bought my first Nikon camera in 1973. My professor in school told me, he said, buy a Nikkormat. It's a poor man's f2. Okay? And I was definitely a poor man at the time. So I scraped together some dough and I bought a Nikkormat and a 50mm lens. You grow up with a camera. It's almost like having a childhood friend or something. I think, without getting too crazy about it, it's a little bit of a part of your personality as well. These photographs represent, a departure for me, certainly the beginning of an adventure. It was my first major story for National Geographic. They sent me to Chihuahua in Mexico. There's a legendary train that runs from the coast into the interior called the Copper Canyon train run. Very rugged terrain and just a beautiful rustic piece of Mexico. These pictures were made on film, wandering the streets. And now, all these years later, I'm wandering the streets of Mexico with a DF, which is, this, as I say, interesting continuum or amalgam of the way I shot here and the machinery I shot here, and now, of course, the advanced technology of digital. I made a transition from being a film photographer to a digital photographer seamlessly. I shot the first all-digital story for the National Geographic. In the history of the magazine, it's the first time they ever did not use a single frame of film. I didn't know much about digital. All I knew was a camera was in my hands. I didn't much care what was going on inside of it, but it felt the same. It felt fast, it felt responsive, and I put my film camera down, I picked up a digital camera, and all of a sudden I was a digital photographer. The DF is a wonderful and imaginative blend of old and new. When I got it to a pretty stressful situation, I was photographing Mexican charros, who are these competitive cowboys. And I'm in an arena, it's full of dust, there's horses charging all over, and the camera is there in my hands, it's light, it's fast, it's tracking. The horses are charging directly at me, so I got a constantly changing plane of focus. So I was curious about that too, like, okay, is this relatively unobtrusive, light-ish camera going to keep up with me in the field, in the middle of all this dust and mayhem? And it did really well. So that was another, moment. I was like, okay, this is working. The camera itself has this wonderful homey feel, a familiar feel, and it has a kind of look to it that is classic, but it has a lot of the features of a cutting-edge digital camera. What makes a great photograph? A photograph that gets your attention emotionally, intellectually, pictorially, informationally. If you can make your photograph impart to it a simple fillip of difference that makes somebody just blink twice, then you've done your job as a photographer.